The 18th century Atlantic was defined by sudden violence, unpredictable weather, and the struggle to communicate across thousands of miles of ocean. This document is an original copy of the American Weekly Mercury, printed on July 28, 1720. This single issue collects dispatches from across Europe and the Americas, providing a cross-section of how governments were actually functioning on the ground. Today, we are tracing 4 specific reports from this edition, jumping from Rome to London and Paris, across the ocean to the coast of Cuba, and into the Caribbean. These columns detail high-level political fugitives outsmarting the cope, deadly domestic riots, state-sponsored forced relocations, and mass casualties on the commercial shipping lanes. While monarchs and parliaments issued proclamations, signed treaties, and drafted royal decrees, the actual exercise of power in 1720 remained intensely localized and fragile. An order from the capital carried little weight unless a local magistrate or naval commander had the immediate physical force to back it up. We start with the highest spiritual and political authority in Europe. The dispatches from Rome and Genoa outline a failure of papal justice. Looking at the April 5th dispatch from Rome, we see the Pope convening a congregation of cardinals. Their goal was to strip Cardinal Alberoni of his rank, deprive him of the purple, and proceed against him capitally, indicating a death sentence. To capture him, the Vatican launched a multinational dragnet. The Pope issued strict orders to all civil and military officers to apprehend the cardinal or anyone in his retinue. Foreign states initially complied. The Senate of Genoa yielded to the Pope's agent, dispatching 2 officers in the dead of night, without a military escort, to secretly arrest Alberoni at his lodging in Sestri di Levante. But state mandates ran headfirst into the reality of local alliances. Alberoni's local ally, Signor Grimaldi, learned of the raid. Grimaldi intercepted the arresting officers on the road, physically stalling them while a messenger rode ahead to warn the cardinal. With that advance warning, Alberoni slipped through the trap. He fled the territory disguised as a pilgrim, accompanied by a single servant on foot. The Vatican possessed vast administrative resources and diplomatic reach across the continent, yet it could not secure one unarmed man operating within its own sphere of influence. At the highest levels of government, an international arrest warrant could be entirely undone by a local contact on horseback. Moving from the Mediterranean to the English Channel, the paper tracks how aggressive economic policies triggered direct violence on city streets. This May 5th dispatch from London reports on the Spitalfields riots. Hundreds of journeyman weavers, facing economic ruin from cheap imported fabrics, assembled as a mob, explicitly targeting the vendors and wearers of foreign calico. Civil policing immediately failed. The state had to deploy the military, calling in the horse guards and the city-trained bands to confront the citizens. To prevent further destruction, the guards fired directly into the crowd. Across the Channel in Paris, the violence was state-sponsored, driven by a need to supply labor to the colonies. The French government had tied its financial survival to the Mississippi Company, a colonial enterprise in North America that required thousands of settlers to function. When volunteers dried up, the state resorted to kidnapping. This May 11th report notes that authorities swept the streets, capturing large numbers of women who were forcibly sent away to populate the distant territory. The state offered these kidnapped citizens a meager compensation package for their new lives: a simple bed, just 4 sheets, only 6 plates, and basic household furniture. These forced deportations continued relentlessly, even as officials received intelligence that the previous fleets sent by the company in February had vanished at sea. To balance trade deficits and populate its overseas territories, the imperial machine relied on applying physical force against its poorest subjects. While governments utilized violence to achieve their aims in Europe, they were defenseless against the uncontrollable environment of the Caribbean. A July 21st dispatch from New York details the arrival of a Captain Messe from Jamaica, carrying news of a maritime catastrophe. Sailing off the west end of Cuba, Messe's crew discovered the rocky shoals completely wrecked, the shoreline covered with dead bodies. The wreckage represented an entire homeward-bound commercial fleet. The loss included 12 heavily laden British ships, a Bermudan schooner, and a New York sloop named the Pearl. Rescuers calculated that between 200 and 300 sailors drowned in the surf, with roughly 150 surviving the initial impact. Those who made it to the beach alive had to abandon their cargo and begin an overland march to Havana. The destruction was indiscriminate. Out of 34 crewmen aboard a man-of-war, the only survivor was a single blind cook. No amount of naval supremacy, route planning, or economic forecasting could withstand the physical precarity of transatlantic logistics. A storm could erase millions in capital and hundreds of lives in a single night. That same lack of control extended to international law. Treaties signed in European capitals regularly dissolved in colonial waters. A dispatch arriving in New York reports that a Spanish privateer pulled into St. Thomas, towing 2 captured merchant ships bound for Boston and Philadelphia. The local governor immediately approached the privateers. He informed them that a cessation of arms, a peace treaty, was actively in effect between their nations, and ordered them to release the vessels. The privateers simply ignored him. They paid no regard to the treaty, illegally unloaded the stolen cargo under the cover of darkness, and sailed away with their prizes. A few days later, a dispatch out of Philadelphia shows what it actually took to enforce international law. In a separate incident, Spanish privateers brought 3 captured English vessels into a different port. This time, Danish authorities met them. Possessing the local firepower to intervene, the Danes obliged the Spaniards to relinquish their claims and comply with the treaty. A cessation of arms meant nothing in the abstract. International law only functioned when a local authority stood on the dock with the guns necessary to enforce it. Reading these dispatches back to back reveals the actual limits of 18th century administration. From the halls of the Vatican to the streets of Paris to the shores of Cuba, central authority was consistently undermined by localized loyalties, domestic riots, and harsh weather. Papal warrants, parliamentary decrees, and international peace treaties held no intrinsic power. They were requests, waiting on a sword or a musket to make them real. The American Mercury documents the daily friction administrators faced just to keep early empires functioning. These dispatches show an era defined by constant friction, where the reach of a state frequently ended at its own coastline or the edge of a localized riot.
The Daily Dispatch, history in print.